This is Podkey Daily News with the biggest pressure points in markets, policy, and risk. The fastest moving story is still the Gulf, where shipping security, ceasefire language, and retaliation threats are all moving at once. After that, the other major thread is AI money: who controls the hardware, who owns the talent, and how much of this boom is priced for perfection. Washington is now tying any extension of the recent ceasefire understanding to a very public demand. Iran must explicitly acknowledge that the Strait of Hormuz is open to commercial shipping. That matters because the military standoff has already spilled into trade risk. Iran fired missiles and drones at multiple Gulf states, including Jordan, and shipping traffic through Hormuz dropped sharply. President Trump also raised the deterrence language again, warning that if Iran strikes once, the U.S. will strike 20 times. U.S. forces have already hit Iranian sites after exchanges of fire and alleged attacks on vessels. There was a one-week lull during Iran's supreme leader's funeral, but U.S. officials are saying the ceasefire is effectively no longer in force, even as talks continue. One more sign of how far this has escalated: Israeli intelligence reportedly uncovered a concrete Iranian plot to assassinate Trump that fed into extra U.S. security measures and shows this is no longer just a maritime deterrence story. What to watch next is simple: any formal Iranian statement on Hormuz, any renewed attacks on shipping, and whether the U.S. keeps this in the channel of pressure and signaling or moves into a wider strike cycle. Apple has sued OpenAI, alleging former Apple employees, including ex-hardware chief Tang Tan, took confidential trade secrets and proprietary parts knowledge with them while recruiting talent away. The complaint says some employees emailed themselves confidential Apple documents as they exited. In Silicon Valley, where this stuff is usually handled quietly, making it public is a big signal. The practical takeaway is that the AI race is moving past software bragging rights and into hard fights over hardware, manufacturing know-how, and who controls the device layer. That lines up with reports that OpenAI wants its own hardware strategy and a kind of walled garden, tying AI services to dedicated devices so users stay inside its ecosystem. At the same time, OpenAI has leadership churn ahead of a planned IPO. Noam Fujisima, who had been set to lead product and business, stepped down after medical leave, which puts more pressure on Sam Altman to answer succession and execution questions. What to watch is whether this lawsuit exposes real technical overlap, whether Apple tries to slow OpenAI's hardware ambitions in court, and whether executive turnover starts affecting OpenAI's IPO timeline. SK Hynix just raised more than $26 billion by listing ADRs on NASDAQ, giving U.S. investors direct access to one of the biggest winners in AI memory demand. The company says most of that money will go into more memory fabs and equipment in South Korea, though management left the door open to future U.S. factory investment after more capital raises. This is a clean read on where the market still is. Investors are willing to fund massive chip expansion because they believe AI spending will stay very high for a long time. The risk is the same as the opportunity. Analysts are warning that if the AI growth story weakens, valuations across memory makers, hyperscalers, and AI startups could reset hard. A lot of current pricing depends on earnings expectations that assume continued CapEx and cloud demand. If that spending slows, companies that rallied hardest on AI, including SK Hynix, are exposed first. The EU has concluded that Meta did not do enough to assess and reduce risks from addictive design features on Instagram and Facebook under the Digital Services Act. If that finding turns into a formal breach, Meta could face fines of up to 6% of global revenue, which makes this much more than another regulatory warning shot. This also matters beyond Europe because it reinforces the broader legal argument already active in U.S. state lawsuits that product design itself can create measurable mental and physical harm. What to watch is whether the EU pushes for product changes, not just fines, because design mandates would have more lasting impact than a financial penalty. In the U.S., a Supreme Court decision now allows the Trump administration to end temporary protected status for more than 300,000 Haitians and Syrians. The immediate impact is practical and severe. Many people could lose the legal right to work and drive right away. Places with concentrated TPS populations are already bracing for disruption. In Springfield, Ohio, where about 15,000 Haitians live, employers expect layoffs and local groups are scrambling to help with food and paperwork. Advocates are pushing asylum pathways, but those routes are slower and uncertain, so this is shaping up as both a labor market shock and a humanitarian one at the local level. Cuba's crisis is deepening under a mix of U.S. maximum pressure sanctions and severe domestic breakdowns, and people on the ground describe a system where daily life is now organized around shortage. Residents are hauling water up multiple floors because pumping infrastructure is decades old. Power cuts are frequent. Transport is so degraded that taxi fares can eat 20 to 30% of a roughly 3,600 peso salary, and fuel shortages have even halted garbage collection in places. That has pushed trash burning, respiratory problems, food inflation, more scavenging, and visible homelessness. A kilogram of sugar at about 800 pesos takes a meaningful bite out of monthly household income.
Mexico and Russia have provided short-term fuel relief, but even people receiving that help describe it as a stopgap. The broader point is that sanctions pressure and internal mismanagement are both being blamed, and neither side of that equation is improving quickly.
Aviation demand is holding up, but the supply side is getting tighter. Delta posted a 19% year-over-year revenue increase in the second quarter, even though higher fuel costs pushed profit down to $1.6 billion. The bigger structural issue is that only 4 Western firms make the high-precision turbine blades used in jet engines and data center gas turbines. That means one bottleneck is now hitting 2 hot sectors at once. Airlines need engines and spares, while hyperscalers need power infrastructure for AI-heavy data centers. With aerospace and power backlogs stretching beyond 10 years in some cases, these suppliers have pricing power and the leverage to pull scarce labor and materials toward them. For airlines and cloud operators alike, this is where execution risk sits now. Demand may be there, but hardware lead times can still cap growth and squeeze margins. Spain is dealing with a deadly wildfire near Los Cañados in Almería, where at least 12 people were killed and 19 were still unaccounted for after heat and strong winds accelerated the blaze. In Brazil, deforestation in the Amazon fell to its lowest first-half level in a decade, which the Lula government credits to tougher enforcement, satellite monitoring, and stronger indigenous land protections. And China says it has successfully recovered a partially reusable rocket, another sign that launch economics are becoming more competitive as Beijing works to narrow the gap with SpaceX. Those are the pressure points that matter most right now. You're caught up with Podkey Daily News. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.